Welcome back to Personalist Manifestos. My name is Michael Morelli, and I'm the host of this ongoing conversation about contemplative revolution. It's been a year, hasn't it? Even if I tried to summarize everything that has happened in 2025, I don't think I'd get close to a comprehensive list. So instead, I want to say thank you. Thank you to everyone who has joined the Personalist Manifestos conversation since it started just over a year ago. Whether you've watched, listened, read, liked, commented, shared, or supported this project financially, your engagement has made this conversation not only possible, but valuable. It gives me hope that true contemplative and transformative conversation is alive and well these days, even if mainstream and alternative discourse attempts to convince us otherwise. In this final episode of 2025, I'm joined by Tripp from Homebrewed Christianity and Billie Hoard from the Seattle School of Theology and Psychology. We talk about the Christmas story and how, in so many ways, it moves in the opposite direction of the stories being told by artificial intelligence prophets, power brokers, and profiteers today. So wherever you're at in this Advent season, I hope this conversation brings you a little bit of hope as it reminds you of what it is to be human, what love truly is, and how, even when it seems dark out there, the light of the world really has overcome that darkness. And with that, here's my conversation with Tripp and Paul. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I'll see you in 2026.
What is up, everybody? This is Tripp. I'm in the tent in my backyard. And I thought, what more authentic space, something to create the atmosphere for talking with Michael and Paul. What's up, fellas?
Hello.
Hello.
So this idea is an interesting origin story. So Michael Morelli, who's been on the podcast before, came to this first theology beer camp this year.
It was great.
Soon, now that we announced everything for this year, I recorded the intro to the AI panel that you facilitated. So it'll be coming out soon. But, last year you kicked off the Personalist Manifesto and we talked at Christmas. You said, let's do it again.
Yeah, thanks, Tripp. It's great to be back. I am all about Christmas traditions, ones that don't take too much effort to sort of create and keep going. So yeah, last year you came on to my new podcast, Personalist Manifestos. We did a Christmas episode where we talked about Bonhoeffer and Christmas because you were working on the Bonhoeffer project, the rise of Bonhoeffer.
Oh, yeah.
And then Advent rolled around. I was like, we should do like an Empire Strikes Back Christmas episode.
Yeah.
And
it's kind of like the Call Me Daddy reveal at the end.
Yes, exactly.
Get it, like the Call Me Daddy podcast and the Luke.
Does that mean somebody has to lose a hand at some point?
Well, Tripp's in the tent, so it's either me or you.
I could really hurt myself if I lean the wrong way, but I don't have any blades or sabers.
It would
no
be
kyber crystals in this tent.
It
Just
would
when
be
you
on
ever
point.
used to snip your cigar.
Yeah. Well, I think it would be on point because we are talking about technology and AI and robots. So if one of us ended up with a robot hand like Luke Skywalker, then I think that'd be great. So I messaged you and I was like, hey, would you want to do another Christmas episode? And you're like, sure thing. I have some ideas about AI and Christmas and excarnation. And then I was like, well, that's a great idea. And I just happened to be talking to my friend Paul here, who I met at beer camp, about a whole bunch of things, including AI and some things that he had been pondering from his perspective and his experiences as a counselor and a prof. So I was like, we should bring Paul in. And then you send us a bunch of things you were thinking about. And here we are talking about AI and the Christmas story. So that is the origin story. Well, Paul teaches psychology and theology, correct?
Correct.
And the Seattle School of Theology and Psychology. Did I get the name right too?
You got it right. You actually got theology in the right order. Most people mix those up.
Nice.
It's not a pretentious name. There's only one school in Seattle. It's the Seattle School.
Yeah, there you go. That's cool though, because you can say I'm from the Seattle school. It's kind
Yeah.
of like, the Seattle version of the Frankfurt school. There's like
Oh,
the
I thought you were going to say it's the Seattle School of the Ohio State University. You're like the Seattle Buckeyes,
no, yeah,
but it's Star Buckeyes. Am I right? The Star
Oh,
Buckeyes. Come on.
oh, here we go.
sports and stuff. So yeah, Paul, you came up and introduced yourself actually after the AI and theology panel that we did, and you're like, "Hey, we're practically neighbors because I live in Vancouver, which is just over the border here in Canada, not Vancouver, Washington, Vancouver, BC, Canada." And you're like, "You also are interested in continental philosophy, and so you've done work in the area of Jacques Lacan and you've written some really interesting stuff on AI from that perspective and how it's fitting into experiences you're having with clients that you're counseling, but also sort of how it's factoring into the theological education and education for counseling that you're doing too. So I don't know. I just thought I would love to have a continental philosophy psychoanalyst, theologian, integrated perspective for this type of conversation. So here you are. So
I was just excited to have a conversation with you. And then you were like, "Hey, I'm doing this podcast. You want to jump on?" So I was like, "All right, cool."
yeah, it's kind of like when you buy a car or you're looking for a particular car and then you just see that car everywhere. It's like that, but at beer camp. We find each other.
We're the Toyota Corollas of beer camp. Is
Yes,
that what you're saying?
exactly. Yeah.
Paul, maybe. Okay, I'm just trying to get where people can start to get a location for where you're coming
Sure.
from. So when you think of artificial intelligence and all the transformations that are taking place for how we understand our own subjectivity as individuals and how our relationships are being worked because of it, and the kind of texture of the lived experience that you're dealing with in a kind of a counseling setting and then training people to deal with, what's the kind of unexamined question you wished more people who took their humanity seriously wrestled with when it comes to AI?
Yeah, no, I'd go straight back to sort of the beginning questions of psychoanalytic theory, which is kind of what is the subject? What's the self? Like, what is consciousness? So much of today's concept of humanity has been just reduced to simple Freudian lingo would just be our ego. Just what I think I am and my identities. And I think it's Philip Cushman who talks about this very flattened self that we tend to walk around with. We're very malleable. And so it's, I'm going to be in my party self or my work self or my home self. But it's this really kind of thin version of ourselves. But none of those ask the question about, well, what's actually happening with consciousness? What's going on with our unconscious? And all that, the very idea of artificial intelligence has to wrestle with what on earth even is intelligence and what is consciousness and what is a person? What is personhood? And those are the questions that I think get sometimes real superficial kind of space and thought. But psychoanalysis has been dealing with this since we started and wrestling with, what about the unconscious? What about the whole very idea that I think I should do one thing and yet I find myself doing the exact opposite? About how there seems to be an other that lives within me, not just in Billy Joel songs, but that there's more to us. And what does that look like when we're interacting with AI or we're trying to build models that we can interact with? And I think that's actually a much deeper question because it helps us, because AI gives us this really fascinating mirror of ourselves, but it's a mirror. And in that sense, it's sort of like trying to understand 3 dimensions by looking at a 2-dimensional image. There's something missing, but there's a lot that we can glean from it. And so that's why I find it a really fascinating place for us to wrestle with what does it mean to even be a person? What is consciousness? And that's where I find, continental philosophy has been thinking about this for a while as well and has a lot of stuff for us to kind of take and start applying here.
Awesome. I'm going to avoid a detour just on everything you just said because we're talking about a robot adventure. Man, sometimes when I think of titles for stuff, I say to myself, what would you do if you're putting it on a youth ministry flyer? Put that up front. And then for the subtitle, put words that remind you of why you're paying student loans. So that I'm like, AI excarnation. You're like, whoa, incarnation. Well, where's the X at? Who broke up with whom? Anyway, But I sent y'all 5 theses that I thought, or themes or something. I don't know what I called them, but they were the things on my Post-it when it's been sitting in my diary that we're going to do this. And when I had ideas while I was editing a book I'm working on AI, and anything came up that seems tangentially related to Christmas and Advent, I just put them on there. And then I sent them to you. And y'all had you had ones y'all liked better. So Paul, first time, he gets to pick first. You pick one. I'll say something about it because I wrote a 2-sentence description of it. Then y'all talk, or then we'll just start talking.
Sounds great.
And I have on my Post-it little nuggets from different philosophers. So we'll even see if Paul and I think of the same continental philosopher to bring into the conversation. This could be really nerdy and no one enjoys it, or it could be really creative and fun. Who knows?
It could be nerdy and just the two of us enjoy it. We don't know which two that's going to be.
I mean, I'll enjoy it too. Don't leave me out.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, we don't know which two. It could be, maybe it'll be the two of you and I'll just be sitting here. I don't know.
Did you just
two or
add
three
a
are
code
gathered.
names element? Is there the game Code Words or Code Names or whatever? I feel like
Code Names is a great party game. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like what Tripp just said is a version of Code Names, but the Continental Philosophy Edition.
Continental Philosophy Edition.
Yeah. I'll use the concept and then we can figure out whose version of the concept I'm using. I'm the gaze. And you're like, whoa, are you talking about the GAYS or the GAZE? And you're like, no, this is continental philosophy, son.
Definitely.
This is the gaze with a Z. I was talking until you were going to tell me a number, Paul.
That's right. Number 2. I was going for number 2. I put it in my email that's my
Yeah, I don't remember what you put in your email. I just have my Post-it.
Advent waiting versus algorithmic immediacy.
Yeah. So here's the idea that popped in my head.
Yeah.
So Advent, season of waiting and longing in the dark, right? We say it's all about anticipation. And in fact, like each week, peace, hope, love, joy, all these kinds of things. I'm going to light the Christ candle, all these kinds of things. You'd think even though story of Luke leading up to birth, it's just a whole bunch of people that have been waiting for a long time. And the moment they see baby Jesus in Mary's belly, they break into a song of longing, picking up all the language of the Hebrew scriptures and they're busting it out in song. Now, the algorithmic world has no interest in longing. It's all about immediacy. And not even just immediacy. It's about prediction. It doesn't even really need an understood question. It just needs something gesturing towards what it might be able to guess. Most people that combine those words want. It attempts to eliminate the gap between desire and fulfillment. And so when we think about a world that's increasingly mediated by algorithms that seek accelerating immediacy, what does it mean that a part of the Christian year and the very beginning of the Christian year is a time of waiting and longing and darkness?
I've got a lot of thoughts on this, and it's part of why I picked it. So the analyst that I'm probably kind of most aligned with, biggest fan of, Jacques Lacan, not Shaka Khan, by the way, Jacques Lacan.
Both and.
I mean, we can bring Shaka Khan in here, but it actually has a lot to say about desire and some of the ways that we completely misunderstand desire. And yet it's actually deeply connected to what makes us alive. So many of us think, right, if I have a desire for something, like I want a cigar now that I'm, a little mimetic desire going on here, Tripp, watching you have a cigar, then I think that the cigar is the thing that making me want it, right? That's the fulfillment that the algorithm is offering, the cigar. And then this fantasy I've now created of like how great it's going to feel. I'm going to feel so cool. I'm going to feel so relaxed. It's going to be wonderful. It's going to taste great. But that's the work of fantasy. What's actually happening is we have to start with actually, before I can have a desire, there actually is a lack. There's a vacuum. There's an emptiness. There's something that I don't have. And now fantasy is the work that makes me think it's that cigar. So desire is actually less about the cigar than it is about my own, in the Lacanian sense, my own lack. And this is what I think Advent is highlighting for us, is that we all on a conscious level want to get the things we want. We're oriented to achieve fulfillment, to get the satisfaction that a cheeseburger offers, that a new car offers, that a raise offers, or whatever, right? But actually, as soon as you get something, what happens? It loses its mystical quality of being able to satisfy you, and it slips onto something else. I see this, as an instructor, I see this all the time. For a lot of my students, getting a degree is, that's their focus. That's what they want. And yet as soon as they get their degree as a counselor, then they want to get fully licensed. As soon as they get fully licensed, then they want to move something else, right? Because we're actually, the thing we think we want is always just a placeholder. And what Advent teaches us to do is to actually sit in the desire, because there's actually a lot of energy. There's a lot of enjoyment. And it's kind of a paradoxical use of the word enjoyment there, but enjoyment that is like life-giving, that happens when we let ourselves sit in desire, as opposed to silencing desire by instant gratification. This is what I think one of the insidious parts of this like instant gratification thing is, that it trains us not to be able to tolerate desire. We often think of the shopper who like the impulsive shopper as somebody with a really strong desire, right? If I see the chocolate, right, as I'm checking out and I grab it right away, that must mean I have a strong desire. But what it actually points to is that's the person that can't tolerate desire. They can't tolerate the feeling of wanting. So they quickly grab the thing that they think they want to silence that internal sensation of want. And I think what Advent is doing in the Christian calendar is actually giving us a time where we actually slow down and focus on what does it feel like to want. I think Lent is another time where we purposely withhold something, what we think we want, in order to listen to more. Because once we grab the thing we want, we're foreclosing the possibilities. And so what the other association had with this was like me in my dorm room in college, right? And talking to a friend, but really people were talking to me because, I was sort of had a crush on somebody who was obviously not a great fit for me, but I had just decided I was really into her. And my friend's talking to me and being like, Paul, I don't think you actually want her. And the more I let myself sit and wait and listen, you realize it's not actually that person that I wanted, or it's not actually that thing that you think you want. Fascinating thing happens with desire. When you let it sit, it shifts. It moves around. I do this in clinical work. I do this with people with addictions. We do this with a lot of different things. If you sit with a desire, like you think you want a chocolate bar, but you wait longer, then you realize, oh, actually I'm just hungry. Or I think I want a Coke, but I'm actually just thirsty. Maybe some bubbly water or just actual water will actually satisfy me a little bit better. Waiting with desire allows it to shift, and it opens us up to something more. And I think that's what Advent is inviting us into. In that sense, almost training us, forming us in a way very different from what you're calling this algorithmic immediacy, where we're actually being trained to be frustrated and to kind of not be able to tolerate that feeling of desire. If it goes too long, we want it right away, right now. And the problem with that is it doesn't open us up to what else our desire might be pointing to. There's more on it, but I'll pause there because I realize I've just been talking for a bit.
Oh, I dig it. What's up, Michael?
I'm really appreciating what you're saying. And one of the things that immediately comes to mind is observing kids opening gifts. As a father, just watching, my 9-year-old, my 5-year-old open gifts, and then cousins opening gifts and that sort of thing. And I realized that the dopamine hit of unwrapping the gift is almost more fulfilling for the kids than actually getting the gift that is beneath the wrapping, which is constantly why you're trying to just hold your kids from going to the next one and say thank you to whoever gave them that gift. And I don't, use this as an example in a condescending sense, because I'm like, well, we're the same scrolling on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, that it's actually the rush of moving on to the next thing, like the little hit moving on, little hit moving on, little hit moving on. I hear that in what you're saying, and the waiting with desire, waiting with anticipation. And when I was looking at these themes, I thought about Chronos versus Kairos time, how this algorithmic immediacy is really locked within Chronos, right? It's just one thing after another. And sometimes it's one damn bad thing after another, right? Another tragedy, another breaking news, another sort of doom scroll hit. But also sometimes it's the delight as well. It's the laugh as well. It's the, oh, I didn't know that this company existed, but this is so cool and I got to get one. But either way, you're locked within this Chronos time, chronic time, and it like compresses time and you're sort of locked in. But Kairos time is different. That's like kingdom time. That's full time. That is Advent time. That is messianic time. And at times, pun intended, it is fast moving, but at other times it feels slow, and there's a delay there, and there's a yearning there, but we tend to equate that yearning and the discomfort it produces as a bad thing. But actually, it is the moment or the moments before messianic inbreaking. It's worth the wait, metaphorically and literally. And it makes me think about how the speed of God, the mission of God in the Advent story is so radically different. You would think that if you were a God incarnate, that you would be born in a really cool castle into a really awesome royal party. And that's just not where he chooses to be born. Totally out of the way. Out of the way. And if you're not waiting, and if you're not awake, and if you're not watching, you're going to miss it. Whether it's the shepherds, or whether it's the magi astrologer guys looking at the stars, there's a otherworldly speed to it. It's not always slow, but sometimes it is. And there's sometimes is a wait, and then sometimes is we got to go quick, right? But that's God's tempo. It's not ours. The other thing that came to mind too is this idea of immediacy. I love this line from Bonhoeffer, who says immediacy is an imposture or an illusion or a delusion, that there's no such thing as an immediate apprehension of anything. There's just the appearance of immediacy. And that can be really dangerous for us, because we see something and we feel like it's so immediate and unmediated that therefore it's reflective of reality and truth. But everything is mediated, right? Even divine disclosure is mediated. And of course, there's so much mediation going on in the Christmas story. So it's not sort of if we are going to be experiencing mediated reality and truth, it's what kinds of mediations are we going to prioritize, and thinking carefully about, where we're putting our stock in terms of mediation. Hopefully it's in the Messiah who's come, who's taken on flesh and dwelt among us. Hopefully that's I mean, this is jumping to another thing I had written down, but this Christ reality, right? All of reality now is mediated by Christ. It's no longer me and the other person unmediated. It's Christ in between me, the other person, and everything else. And I feel like that's the way to get to this waiting with desire, as compared to this Chronos time that has just got us distracted with an apparent immediacy that's kind of ruining our brains and bodies. And I'm sure you could comment more on the brain and body part than I could, Paul, but yeah.
Well, and it's just the thing I want to highlight. Like, you don't see Jesus in the manger. Like, you don't recognize the Savior. You don't recognize that as God. If you're so caught up on, this is what I need, this is what it is. If you're so caught on getting what you think you want, you will miss what actually is happening, the actual inbreaking. And how many people miss Jesus because they were waiting for the King, as we think of it. And so it's that part of what waiting does is open yourself up to the possibility that what you want isn't what you think you want, right? That you're getting something that's far more important, but it's not what you think you want. I mean, this is one of the age-old wisdom things of, thank goodness I didn't get what I wanted. Thanks goodness I didn't get my wishes, because actually I got something far more important. I didn't even know what I actually wanted. And that's, I think, this other important aspect of it is that, like, when we're so stuck in immediacy, or kind of the Chronos time, as you're talking about it, we're still captured by what we think we want, which means we're still trying to control it and we're still looking for it. And when you're laser focused on it, you're not open to what actually you are getting, what else is going on out there. And so that continues to blind us to the possibility of more.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So in my head, y'all have two different topics. Then the Christ reality thing is just, you should just save that for the end, because that's that getting it, how how Bonhoeffer does the incarnation. And it's so good. It should be a closing sermon. You know what I mean? But I'll go backwards. Here's what comes to my mind about what you were talking about, Michael, about the time bit. It reminds me that Byung-Chul Han talks about the way in which we've lost narrative time, right? And he makes a similar distinction of the chronos, kairos type thing of point time versus story time. And that distinction between like additive time, where there's like a sequence of isolated moments and events, the kind of reality that the algorithm invites you into, like the entrancing fascination of serially unchosen presentations of bits. And that's a very different kind of form than narrative time, which has a history and closure, right? And when you think of the Advent stories, all four gospels, but I mean, the ones you're most familiar with in most times, unless you're in our Advent class with me and Diana that does all four gospels, is Matthew and Luke spend a lot of time grounding the event in the history of Israel, in the empire of Rome, right? Simeon, Zechariah, Elizabeth, all of them that are wrapped in song in Luke are encountering an event and going, this is what we've been waiting for in this whole history, right? And then you get something similar in Matthew where there are all these echoes of scripture and such. But one of the things about algorithmic presentation where there's no engagement with our frontal cortex and our kind of decision-making process for what we're attending to, it's getting to know us to perform a series of point times to hold our attention, to monetize it. And it does not invite us to linger. And when I think of one of the gifts of Advent and that time dichotomy, this loss of narrative time, is it invites us to cultivate the ability to linger. The digital rush, in a sense, destroys the capacity for closure or lingering, forcing us to rush from one sensation to the next, like binge watching or the infinite scroll. And I think Advent is an invitation to a habit, a story, one that began a long time before we showed up and one that goes way past us. But that feed is forcing us into a kind of phoretic standstill of point time over and over. And in Paul's bit, it reminds me that in that conversation about desire, I think a lot of what our kind of algorithmic existence does is the death of desire.
Yes.
And this is something I'd love for you to kind of help me think. This is something I've been thinking about because availability, this is something Hartmut Rosa makes a big point of, that availability kills longing. He points out that making the world available at a click kills uncontrollability. The Advent stories are the stories of uncontrollability. They are surprises. They're chaotic moments. And uncontrollability is actually required for desire to flourish. The kind of desire that's grounded in something beyond the stimulation of the immediate, and a completely controllable world, one that I think we're increasingly infatuated with as a culture, is one that Rosa points out actually mute the world. Mm-hmm. And it becomes unappealing because there's nothing left to discover in a world that's fully available in the kind of mediated digital reality that's there. Yeah, those are kind of like the theory points that pop in the head of two themes that y'all both brought up.
Well, at the end there, I mean, my mind goes directly to the comedy show, The Good Place. I don't know if either of you watched that, but the spoiler alert for anybody, I guess. But they're most of the characters find themselves in a paradise. They can have anything they want, everything they want. But that actually, you find out that's actually hell. Is the whole switch. And I think it's exactly what you're saying, Tripp, is that like actually getting everything you want, the instant immediacy, the lack of the uncontrollability is actually hell. And this is where I think an understanding of like human consciousness becomes really important, because like up until this point, we're still dealing predominantly with our conscious selves, with who we think we are in the world we think we can control. And that desire to control, that desire for comfort, that desire to get what you want, like all of those are well within your ego. And yet what psychoanalysis reminds us is there's so much more to you than that. That is actually like a false image of you from the outside. And that life happens, the life energy, you feel alive in moments often when you experience some form of like transcendence, some form of pushing past the limits of who you think you're supposed to be, of who you think you can be. And that's where we actually start feeling alive. And I mean, we see this, I'll just like in couples therapy, when I'm working with two partners, right? Like a relationship typically is dead when you can look at your partner and go, well, I know everything there is to know about you. I guess that's that, right? If you actually knew fully your partner, there's no love there. Love requires longing. It requires continuing to desire, continuing to move towards. And so if you reach a point where you've got it all, that's actually a depressing moment. Like that now we're in like the Strokes, is this it moment. Is this it? And because and this is where I think desire is fascinating. Like we so quickly collapse desire into object of desire, as opposed to the aim of desire, which is to keep desiring. Like you feel alive when you're working towards something. I think about this because I'm a complete board game nerd, by the way. I play way too many of them, and I write about them, I speak about them, I talk at board game academics conferences. It's a whole thing. But like games are fascinating because the game ends when you get what you want. When somebody wins, the game's over. We pack it up and put it away. The fun is actually alive when no one has achieved their goal, when everyone is moving towards it, but not actually getting it. And so that's where the algorithm just wants to collapse it to make a game like a you win game. Congratulations, Michael, you win. Wasn't that fun? Now you win again. And then you win again. And you win again. And it takes away actually the struggle and the movement towards, which is where desire and enjoyment in life is actually found.
I'm just thinking about how many people are experiencing their own version in the Advent story of, well, I thought life was going this way, but then. And there are people who want to say, but then this happened, but I kept staying the course of what I thought things were going to be. And then there are people who say, and then maybe right away, I realized that things needed to change or were changing and I needed to catch up. Or I need a moment to contemplate this before I figure out what I'm going to do. And Zechariah comes to mind of like he becomes mute for a while because he needs time to shut up and think about this visitation that he has had and how that is going against his sense of how things are going to go, tradition that are more the product of people than they are of God, and realizing that I thought things were going this way, but now I'm being taken this way. But then you see others marry right away. It's like, all right, I'm on board. And we typically stop, not to say we, the universal we, but a lot of messages stop when, at the Magnificat, when it talks about, oh, and God has looked upon me with favor as a humble and lowly servant. And that's where we stop and like pat Mary on the head. And then you're like, where she keeps going past that point about like overthrow of principalities and powers and the people in high places being brought low, the rich being sent away empty, those who are sort of on the margins are the ones who are going to experience God. And, to quote Tripp here, oh, you're like, oh, junk, right? This is, it's on, she gets it, right? But then I think about Joseph. And if Joseph was in a rush, he would have concluded that he had just been cuckolded, right? And left Mary quietly, right? But because he's visited by an agent of God and he listens, he kind of concludes the exact opposite of what most quote unquote reasonable people would. And by concluding that and being faithful to God and faithful to his fiancée, he gets to be like front and center for the birth of Messiah and get to be like part of raising this child. But that's pretty opposite of what you would have in mind in terms of your life and marriage plan. But that's such a key, right? It's such a key right? So all these people are like, I thought this was happening. I thought this was the way it's going. And God's, no, I'm taking you this way. This is the story being written. And if you're not careful, you're going to miss it.
Yeah. All right, Michael, you can pick the next theme here, but you can't pick two because that's what we just did.
Right.
I mean, there's more to say, but we can keep moving on.
I know, because or we're only talking about one of them the whole time.
The whole time. And that's not fun.
Then I wasted Post-its.
Yeah.
Don't want to do that.
Can't waste your Post-its.
So there are a lot of things that I want to talk about, but one of the things that really got my brain wheels turning was the first theme, incarnation versus the great excarnation. And this kind of fits in a little bit with Paul's earlier comments, but I was thinking a lot about an episode of Black Mirror. Anybody watch the TV series Black Mirror?
I know of it, but I've actually seen it.
Okay, if you watch it, buckle up. Like the pilot is the ultimate test. If you can get through the pilot episode, it's very disturbing in how close to reality is for the uninitiated. It's a science fiction series that's kind of like technological sci-fi body horror stuff. Each episode is a different sort of set of actors and plot lines and stuff. There's kind of the Black Mirror universe where it's set in the not too distant future, but it's exploring our relationship to technology. And it's so well researched and so well written, acted, and executed. It's very disturbing because you're like, we're actually not that far away from this sci-fi reality if we're not already there. But the episode that comes to mind for me is one in season 3. It's called San Junipero. And it's set in this fictional town in California in the 80s. And what you find out is like people can go to the metaverse and sort of live their best lives in this virtual world. And the main character, who is very introverted and shy and doesn't really have a social life in the offline world, sort of retreats to this world and meets another person in this virtual world and falls in love. Spoiler alert, you find out as this couple meets and falls in love that one of the people is much older and is actually on her deathbed. And the episode ends with this nod to consciousness upload. So even though the older person passes away, they actually meet in real life. The two characters, she passes away, they can still meet in the virtual world. And the closing sequence just kind of is just embedded in my brain, where the song Heaven is a Place on Earth plays, and it's just a zoom out of a computer mainframe with blinking lights. And it's basically sort of saying, maybe heaven isn't sort of like this idea of, the eschaton, what we think about in terms of the new heavens and new earth. Maybe it's consciousness uploading, right? And what I felt was really interesting about that is the commentaries and a lot of the sort of readings of that show is like, see, not every episode of Black Mirror is dark and scary and disturbing. A lot of people pointed to that episode as like, see, like there's a happy love story embedded in all of this. And I'm like, I don't think that that's what the show creators were trying to say. Because if you listen to the music, right? And this is where the Lincoln is, like one of the songs is Girlfriend in a Coma by the Smiths, or another song is Living in a Box. And the point is, it actually was one of the most disturbing episodes for me, because it's like, we settle for this vision of virtual relationships and love, a future version of that, a simulacra version of it, when actually like life in the here and now with actual human beings, not in the virtual world, there is the possibility of love there. And so our vision of this sort of virtual heaven actually affects our present relationships, and we're cut off from people. And so that's what I wanted to talk about is these like competing visions of, one is, an excarnation. We escape our embodied reality and the people around us and the possibility of relationship and love in our current context. And we have this vision of a technological future where we can escape that and exist in heaven. And the Christmas story is one in which, like, the future, the eschaton comes to us, right? The new heavens and the earth comes down, right? The incarnate word of God brings that to us. And hopefully that informs our vision of the past, present, and future. So that's kind of the incarnation versus excarnation vision that I wanted to talk about. And I felt like the Black Mirror episode was like a helpful way to concretize it. But I think a lot of people missed the deeper message there and just kind of took it at face value, which kind of is a reflection of our desires and our current reality.
No, that's really helpful, because one of the things that happens in all the ways technology helps us excarnate ourselves from kind of lived fleshly reality is it starts to eliminate friction. And in many ways, smoothness is a trap. If technology promises us a friction-free world, one where at the end you're like, oh, this is what true love is. It's a friction-free relationship where we're just, oh, it's perfect and blah, blah, blah. And then a friction-free world is one where true engagement never really happens. It happens in the sense that it's simulated, but it's always already on the terms of the subject itself, right? Paul was talking earlier, right? You're sitting there talking to a couple and they're like, oh, I don't even know what to do. I mean, we both just know each other completely. And you're just like, what the hell are you talking about? Have you met a human? Like, you haven't even met the person you did promise to show up for till you're dead. You think you understand the mystery of their subjectivity. What have you been doing? Right. And if a person or an idea challenges us in our current world, where there's like this trap of smoothness or like an allergy of friction, we're like, unfollow. We want to remove the resistance. It's actually required for growth. And it's not just growth towards the other. It's actually a growth of self-understanding. Like, the self is a self in relation to others. That Paul Ricoeur's Gifford lectures, I think, are beautiful in exploring it. And part of it is because intimacy requires genuine struggle. Norman Wurzba, really cool theologian, when he was on the podcast, we got in a conversation about this, that in there he was looking at friendship, which is, hopefully it's a part of all loving relationships, because that's the part that endures when infatuation doesn't. So, but true depth in friendship requires like entanglement. And entanglement is this weird mixture of connection and difference. It requires working through difficulties. Like, the otherness of the other is preserved, but it's preserved in relationship. In the incarnation, in a sense, is the high friction self-investment of the divine. It involves blood, birth, vulnerability. And I think the artificial intelligence is being used to offer us a smooth, commodified experience that demands nothing from us and gives us back ourselves in a narcissistic isolation chamber. And then we go, oh, it's so smooth. Let's pan out at the end of this really cool Black Mirror episode and think, we've arrived. And that is the opposite of the arrival of a manger. A manger with a couple who is forced to show up here because of an exploitative tax system of a Roman Empire, and there's no space for them where they're going. And where do they show up? Where does the baby go? In a manger. The place that humans only show up to when there's no real human food to eat and you're pinching off the cows. And this is the bread for the world. Right there. And who knows it? Shepherds, because an army of angels show up. Or magi from some other world follow a star, right? To me, the frictionless world that we are kind of infatuated in and being told this is what success looks like is one that is, it's not just distancing us from the fleshliness of the incarnation. It's alienating us from the fleshliness of who we are and the friction that's required in genuine relationships of love and friendship to become known. Yeah. And in our becoming known by another who's different, we get to know ourselves, right? And then, so then what was Matthew do in the crescendo of Matthew's, Advent story is God is Emmanuel with us.
Yep.
So,
well, no, I get really excited by what you're saying, because I think it comes back to what is love? Baby, don't hurt me. Because it really comes back, I think, comes back to what do we even imagine love to be? And this is where I'll always kind of take the psychoanalytic bent, but like we have this fantasy of love that's just about comfort, that's completely narcissistically self-serving. I mean, what you described at the end of that episode, I mean, it's the Stepford Wives, just digitally, right? And I think that's actually what so much of our fantasies of this perfect union where the other person, and listen to the language, the other person will meet my needs. They'll do everything I need, which means the other person is now just an object that takes care of me. So if I can have an object that does it, why would I need another person? Because we've reduced love to our own comfort, which it reduces, as you're saying, Tripp, that actually reduces our own subjectivity. One of the definitions of love that I really enjoy is Todd McGowan. He says, love is the way that otherness disturbs identity. And because when you love someone, like your identity, you're changed. Like love changes you and the other's love changes you. And because part of what it is love points to a desire. And remember I said, when you have a desire, that means you lack. So love points to the fact that you are not enough. You are not self-sustaining. You are not able to posit your own identity. You are not, like you're saying, Tripp, you're a self in relationship, which means you're not self-sufficient. Right? Completely that goes against this idea of the hyper-individualistic, predominantly masculine ego of, look at me, this is who I am. Love exposes, no, we can't. We aren't who we think we are. We desire. And we desire an other who also desires, which means they also lack. So Lacan's definition for love is, and this is one of those obnoxiously sort of cryptic ones, is giving what you don't have to somebody who doesn't want it. Giving what you don't have is giving your nothing, giving your lack, your emptiness, your vulnerability to somebody who on one hand fantasizes that you will be everything for them. You'll be the it for them, but that you aren't, because that exposes that they also want. And so it's actually in not being able to be that. It's in our inability to have that like perfect union. That's actually where love is found. And I think that's what Jesus is doing in the divine coming to earth in the incarnation. Is actually entering our messy, contaminating kind of gross world. I think the other part of the incarnation has always been really fascinating to me, because I also do a lot with my sister around disgust and the way the psychology of disgust works. But like, we typically kind of put beings on the sort of almost like a spectrum of like lower, we have like animals and demons, and then higher we have like humans, and then we have angels and the divine, right? And typically when it's really interesting, depending on your perspective, when a lower and a higher intermingle, it's either disgusting, contaminating, or it's uplifting, right? So to the prince who marries the pauper, right? Then it's a scandal to the royal family, but it's like amazing to the pauper's family, right? And when humans mix with animals, we call them monsters. When humans mix with angels, we call them divine, right? With the divine, we call them angels. So God incarnating into earth should contaminate God by our nasty pooping body meat sacks and all of our grossness. But instead, what happens is it goes the other way around. God contaminates us through the incarnation. And what that does is mean love, then instead of being this fragile thing that needs to be protected from all the bad things out there, love is this like germ, like this like infection that then spreads through us, which totally changes the way we think about dealing with each other. So now the unsettled feeling that you get meeting another person isn't, oh no, they're bad, they're going to change me. It's actually great, they're going to change me. Like that's something like I can actually be contaminated by interacting with otherness, with those who I experience as other, because that's actually how love spreads. It's in that destabilizing disturbance that actually I think desire points to, that I think love continues to point to. It's when you love someone, you're not left the same.
Yeah. Okay. Here's something that popped in my head. I think there's a connection, Paul.
Okay.
And I just want you to tell me.
Let's do it.
Don't ever bring this up again in relationship to this, or that's worth asking again.
Yes.
Because
best question.
Especially if you take that dynamic you're describing and then think about, I don't remember what article it was, but recently I saw it was tracking the impact of COVID on normalizing digital mediation of intimate relations, right? So you have to like begin with Robin Dunbar's number. I mean, it's It is a cross-cultural number that shows up, that we have like generally about 120 people that any one human possesses the narrative cognitive load to understand themselves in relationship to. And this is, it is cross-cultural in the present, and even in, doing analysis of anthropology. Like this is how we work. Human beings, we haven't evolved biologically to have mechanisms to do it better, even if Facebook lets us have 5,000 friends,
Yeah.
And one of the things it seems to me is that mediation, especially when it happens in a screen, like since 2020, the non-digital natives jump by how many of their relationships are screen mediated and algorithm mediated. And that made me think of this concept that Hartmut Rosa uses when he talks about the screen, that it functions as a bottleneck that filters out tactile or audio or sensual, smell, all these kinds of dimensions of reality. And then we end up interacting with a hard, rigid, cold surface rather than the responsive, flexible world that any of us rocking our meat sacks do. And then it makes us like become comfortable with that mediation, because it protects us from genuine encounter. The screen delivers a kind of simulation of resonance, like the harmony in distinction that shows up. And then we're like, yeah, well, how about a notification? It mimics connection, but it fails to leave us energized or transformed. We get an echo of a relationship without that transformative energy of genuine encounter. And when I think of the incarnation showing up in that relationship dynamic that you were describing, like part of it is like God's refusing to be an echo. It is a genuine encounter. And this is one of those features of Christianity. We will say about God even what our monotheistic neighbors won't say. That the refusal to be an echo meant Jesus took a shit.
Yeah, no, our God,
Okay, fun boot.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think of like how there's this bottleneck of the screen, this flattening of the other, and it's generated a kind of appetite for simulation of encounters without the dirty friction of genuine otherness being savored in its otherness. There's something that like when we, even going back right to thinking about the excarnation image that Michael started off with, there's something really being lost. And I wonder if at a time where we're sitting, waiting and thinking about the significance of the incarnation, if it shouldn't problematize just how comfortable we became in lockdown with even outsourcing to the screen the mediation of relationships, that are extremely important. I mean, just think about sitting in a car. I'm driving with all 5 members of my family with headphones on, doing their own thing. And then I suggest, couldn't we all just listen to the same music and have a group playlist? And they're like, oh God, I don't want to listen to what he wants to listen to.
Yeah.
I'm just sitting there going, geez, we had to listen to whole sides of tapes before anyone else got to pick in my car.
Can I jump in here? Because I just want to say something that I think what you're talking about shows, and I got this from Elul, that shows paradoxically, the more technological we get, the more physically graphic we get on screen, and as a wider culture. So you talked about the COVID-19 pandemic and how, adoption of, digital technologies, social media relationships skyrocketed. So did like OnlyFans, and people.
In the name of that, rather revealing, OnlyFans, and they will do things for OnlyFans they would never do for anyone important in their life.
Yeah. Well, and just like in terms of pornography, but also film and creativity, right? Body horror, like the more technological and sterilized we get, the more we move away from, our bodies, the more we sort of go online to prove how embodied we are by sort of normalizing a level of exposure and graphic sexuality or violence in order to prove to ourselves that we still have bodies, which is this strange paradox because you're like, how are these things related? No, it makes total sense because we're longing for that, and we sort of become used to the graph, so we keep having to up the ante when actually the answer is to return to just our day-to-day existence and the limits and not being able to see everything and know everything and expose everything right away. And even just, moving away from the sexuality piece, but relationships, one of the things I wrote down on this theme was maturity is realizing that it's not a good idea to date or marry a version of yourself, right? Like
Really?
all the same interests,
I've just,
Of
all
course,
the,
it should be it should be your mom. It should be a
yeah,
version of
that's even better.
That's not.
gosh, that's the psychoanalyst to say that.
Then
No,
the-
but like at a certain point, like I had to realize that like dating somebody is just like another version of me with all the same favorite, books and films and just like interest. Like I'm enough for me. There's joy and growth in meeting somebody who is unlike you. Maybe you have some commonalities, maybe you have some similar values, but like the resistance and the particularity of another person and learning about that and growing beyond what you just like currently is that's the beautiful thing. But you can't discover that within this algorithmic echo chamber. Right. And finally, what I would just say too is there's a quote that I love from Willie Jennings at the end of Christian Imagination, where he talks about, in the Hebrew Bible, it's God's, thundering down from Mount Sinai. Right. But in the Advent story, it's no longer that voice thundering from Mount Sinai. Now it's the cry of a baby on the lap of Mary, covered in post-birth stuff. Right? That's the primary voice of God now sounding out to us from there. So go there, start there in all of that post-birth reality in a very, very messy animal overrun space with some people who are also considered messy and unclean. That's where we go now.
And if I can, I want to jump in because I actually want to take us a little bit back to that. One of the first things we were talking about with the formational movement of Advent of slowing down. Because one of the ways I think of it is sort of like relationships that are mediated so much through the screen, or in some ways are like empty calories, right? That they give you a taste of something, they give you a feel of something. And the danger is that it feels like it's enough that you forget that you're not getting any nutrients, that you're not risking the disturbance of the real of another person, of the messiness of actually being with people. But I do want to say it does provide something. Like there is something that it does and I think particularly in COVID, one of the values of some of the screen media is that connection happened. I mean, I think kept a lot of us sane to be able to do that. The danger of not putting value in a more, I would say maybe a more robust, a riskier, a more maybe a contaminating actual like fleshy interaction is that we can trick ourselves into thinking that's all there is that we would reduce relationships to that. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with having a Coke every now and then. However, if you think that you're hydrating yourself fully and getting all of your nutrients by drinking Coke, and that's all you ever drink, like you are in a really dangerous place. And so I think that there's something about what's scary is just how much it kind of tricks which it can prey upon our desire for connection by giving us the feeling of connection, but it's just the image. And that's why it always leaves us empty. It always leaves us wanting more, because I think actual relationship, actual love, what we're really looking for requires risk and requires all of this sort of disturbance that we've been talking about of how messy love actually is. And so I think one of the beauties of Advent is to slow down and to kind of put a pause in our lives, and the other ways we haven't even realized we've been just, hey, no, I know I have my good times with my friends, or I'm feeling good because I've had a great conversation with ChatGPT. It forces us to slow down and to say, actually, let's eat your vegetables for a little bit. Go touch some grass, eat your vegetables, drink water, slow down. Don't do things that just feel good. Actually resist your comfort for a little bit. move towards the darkness, because otherwise your world, like the danger of comfort, right, is that it's always going to get smaller. When we see this in like people working with trauma or just in anywhere, right? Your comfort zone will just continually shrink if you let comfort be your guide. Because suddenly going outside to the stores, oh, that's uncomfortable. So how many of us stop going to stores anymore? We just have people deliver the groceries to us or put it in our trunks because, well, it's a little uncomfortable, right? And if you let comfort be your guide, your world will get smaller. We have to build in rhythms where we do the uncomfortable, we do the risky, and that's obviously got to be individualized to us. But I think what Advent gives us is a season within the church calendar to actually enter into that and to remember that that's exactly what God did in entering into our world.
Well, that's awesome. Okay. I'm glad in an hour we did 2 of these. Okay. All right. Here might be a way to. I have a question that I'd like to ask, and then y'all can say whatever before we wrap up. You can just squeeze whatever else you want to say into it. But here's what I was thinking about today. No, we're going to do this. And it's about how the otherness of God showing up in like the form of a stranger plays out. And how, I mean, we've already touched on some of this, but I think like genuine otherness is something, despite the, I don't know what you want to call hyperbolic otherness of triggering things that show up in a data stream to hold our attention. Genuine encounters, like resonance with otherness, is something that's dissipated. And knowing we got a little psychoanalyst here, I thought, oh, this could be fun to hear about. So
Here we go.
if we think of the manger as the symbol of the holy other, and then we think of 80% of our interactions with other humans being mediated by the mirror of a smartphone and its algorithmic engine, it seems that part of what our current form of life is one that has made us native to a narcissistic loop where algorithms create a kind of resonant, in scare quotes, space purged of foreignness, leading to hell of the same, where only encounter our own preferences mirrored back. And the algorithm succeeds by doing it better because they know it holds more of our attention, helping us exist in the gaze of the same as opposed to the gaze of the other. And I think that otherness, that gaze of the other, the encounter of the other, is when we lose it, that creates a genuine psychological danger. Like without the external gaze to provide stability, the kind of demand it puts on us to stabilize our own ego in relationship to difference, it generates depression and emptiness. And then it does this weird thing. Tara Isabella Burton uses the NPC example, where there's this kind of dehumanization of the neighbor with the moment disembodied interaction generates this desire for us to view others as NPCs, non-player characters. If you don't spend too much time watching Elon Musk perform total depravity on Twitter, it turns others into NPCs in our own video game, because in this narcissistic hell of the same, everyone else is just a background for the story we're telling, where we're at the center, and everything we see through the algorithms reminds us that that's the case. And I think there's this kind of divinization of desire that shows up, where our internal wants that the algorithm successfully knows better than we might be transparent to ourselves are now entreated, that our desires are treated as authoritative truth, isolating us from the unchosen obligations of genuine community. And so whether it's friends and family or the larger public square or your neighbors, we turn them into NPCs, love the encounter of the narcissistic loop, reject the gaze of the other. And all of a sudden we think the salvation of a mirror. And then God shows up as the holy other and says, what about the manger? And like when I think of, all 5 of the themes I sent and such, and what are the technological predicament or temptation we face in the Advent season. That to me is like the most troubling. It's like the one where I start describing it and then I look at myself and go, good luck. Oh, wait, I got a notification. I'm going to try to look at it without letting Michael and Paul know I'm ignoring them. You know,
Just gonna quickly check my watch.
yeah, I plugged mine into charge because I knew that could happen, you know,
Yeah.
and I've seen videos of myself like talking to famous people. I've spent years hoping to finally talk on I'm like finally talking to Cornell West, and then Tripp's doing this. And you're like, dude, you read every one of his books, listened to his Gifford lectures twice, spent who knows how much time preparing 20 pages of notes for this interview. And all of a sudden you were like, oh, it's my memories from this date over the last 15 years. I should scroll through them while he's talking. But that mirror manger dynamic. Anyway, that's my general prompt for Tripp's conclusion. Now y'all can do whatever.
Well, one of the things I don't want to jump in on, particularly with the way you described the mirror, is that the mirror also, it doesn't just stage what you think you want. It stages otherness for you in a particular way that is ego affirming. So what keeps us engaged actually isn't just watching things we like. It's watching things that make us angry, watching things that get, and this is like the whole, like the rich Twitter rage thing, right? Is that actually it further dehumanizes, but it's in a way where you see the other only in so much as it affirms your view of them and your predetermined objectifying gaze. And so
okay,
you can
pause 1 second, Paul. Do you know what just popped in my head?
Yeah.
Oh, every theology nerd's favorite version of the Advent, the Johannine prologue, the word, and he came to his own and they knew him. It's like the opposite of that.
Exactly. And because what it's inherently dehumanizing. And this is the kind of one of the cores of narcissism is that it's propping up yourself at the expense of others. It's reducing the other to an object to try to fill yourself and make yourself feel whole. So I can feel good about myself because look, I know better than all those idiots over there. And look how terrible they are. And that actually prevents me from having to question myself, sit with my lack, sit with my desire, be curious about who I am, which is exactly what the manger does. Is actually when you sit with the manger, you also have to wrestle with, why did I want it to be in a palace? Why am I so disturbed by God coming in this way? What did that mean for me, that I wanted God to come in and be powerful? That suddenly I realized, oh yeah, I wanted baby Zeus born. That's what I wanted. I wanted to see big lightning bolts and big muscles and big strong, because really I was just projecting myself onto God. I think there's that when I talk about like the value of psychology and theology talking to each other in my classes. There's the old joke of God made humans in God's image, and we've been returning to favor ever since. Is this idea of that's what we do, is what we actually want to create a God that we can control, that affirms who we are, a God that does the mirror thing you were just talking about, that our phones are doing for us. And what the manger does is subvert that. And if we're willing to sit and listen to it, instead of turning the manger into this like beautiful, bodily fluid free, happy zone of just pleasant, happy Mary and Joseph, and allow its like messy, fleshy, kind of gross, probably stinky, all that other thing, part of it to sit with us and disturb. Oh, God's actually doing something to me. And this is actually revealing a lot more about why I wanted God to be clean and tidy and strong and, probably white and all those other things that like all my isms would project onto God to make me feel better about who I am. I don't know. That's kind of the first place I went.
Oh, no. I feel like that was the preface to the prayer of confession. That's what.
Well, one of the things that I just am thinking about as I listen to what both of you are saying is that the God that is love is not a Platonic ideal that we access in the sky. We don't access that love apart from the love that is the ground of all being, the being that is the source of all being. And the Advent story is the confirmation of that. And you talk about John's gospel, right? I mean, it's heresy if you're a Platonist. And so if there is this pure God and that love, like the God that is love and the God that is spirit, becomes a baby, then that just changes our, not just even our understanding of love, but our experience of love, right? And using this language of mirrors, that also holds up a mirror to us. Because I'm thinking about the Apostle Paul saying we see through a lens darkly or a mirror dimly, or depending on how you translate, right? This is going back to this idea of mediation. We're always looking at mirrors. The question is what are we looking at? And so it's a different type of mirror. Like when you hold a baby, you're looking at this baby, and you could just stare at this baby for a super long time, and it's not even doing that much. But the more you contemplate this baby, the more you start contemplating yourself, and the more you sort of are like thinking about your environment. There's just a level of reflection there, right? And it's metaphor, but it's also literal, that gazing upon another human, especially this vulnerable human that you're just cradling, there's a reflection that happens there. And I think, the Messiah baby is the ultimate mirror and reflection for us to gaze upon. And it's not something that we can sort of just master in a moment, right? Soren Kierkegaard makes this point that truth is always experienced indirectly, right? Immediacy or direct apprehension of truth, he says, is paganism. It's idolatry. The moment we say, aha, I got it, right? We've done what you said. We've made God in our image. No, the God that is love, that becomes an infant, explodes all static visions and now it's dynamic. Now it's really on. And the beauty of that is you can never reach a point where, well, I got it now, right? In the same way you can't do that with just the average person, you definitely cannot do that with the incarnate word. And the Advent story, I think, is an invitation to that. And I just want to, I'll end this in the construction, is how then do we conduct ourselves both in the offline world, but in the online world in such a way that we reflect that? Because I want to say that it is possible to take what we're talking about and introduce it into our communities, like local communities. But I also want to say we can do that online to a certain extent, right? We can actually disrupt. I want to imagine how this story helps us generate and imagine that we might actually disrupt this algorithm that says it can predict everything and sort of just manipulate our desires because it's got them nailed now, and then it can like fan that flame in order for profit and predict what we will buy and won't buy, or who will vote for and won't. I'm like, if this affects me in the offline world, surely it could also affect me in the online world too. And so I even just from the place of hope want to hope that in both worlds, because they're not going away anytime soon, it seems, they're related somehow. And actually, even what we're doing now somehow, I think, disrupts just the business as usual of the algorithm and all the aspirations and warped sort of visions that we get in this world. So that'll be that's kind of my thinking, is that there's always more love to discover. We never just reach the end, and the Advent promises us that.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to, you mentioned Bonhoeffer's incarnation stuff earlier, Michael. So just want everyone to know that it's awesome. And I talk about it a lot on the podcast, but like element of it that shows up right here is this. He has kind of like an Advent inversion of the disciples' hermeneutics, right? They part of what we do at Advent is pause, wait, and pray this anticipatory prayer, right? Where, come, Lord Jesus, come. And one of the things that blew my mind, and like especially in relation to this conversation, that kind of gave me a framework for thinking about doing what you're doing, what you were talking about there in the last 2 years working on the whole audio doc and everything. In this summer, I got to teach a class in Bonhoeffer's house in Germany, which was like wild. I like sitting there in his bedroom where he wrote ethics,
Nice.
but like in that place, there, like Christ becomes the center of reality, but not in this kind of Christian supremacy sense, but in the hermeneutics of a disciple. That that prayer of Advent, to come, Lord Jesus, come, then becomes the way in which you interpret reality, so that every other that you come in contact to and are related to is the invitation to respond to Christ. Whether it's your friend, your family, your neighbor, your enemy, our non-human neighbors. One of the things Bonhoeffer points out that I think is something that may not become clear until you spend the time waiting is that the engine to cultivate that hermeneutics of discipleship, where the other is the encounter with Christ, is learning to do that for yourself, right? To look in a mirror and see yourself looking back. And that other, that gap between who you are and who you will be and could be and have been, is the invitation to encounter the divine, and we can see that, right? Like there's this bit in 10 years after this letter he wrote right before he got arrested, that his family would read at Christmas when he was in prison. They would read paragraphs and then argue with him about it. And of course, since I was like in the literal house where they had those arguments, I'm like, I'm going to tell this story and get them to argue about these paragraphs. But the paragraph in it that I've been dwelling on, given our current historic moment, is one where he says that, like the biggest temptation we face is justifying the contempt we have for others. Even members of the church that went to the German Christian church, right? Nazi Christians. You think like this is the greatest temptation we face. And all of a sudden we're going to have contempt for them, even though they're wrong, stupid or evil, whichever version of them you get. And then he has this riff, right, on Paul, where he said, no, you don't get it. While you were yet sinner, God gave God's self for you. So start there. And, part of what the reality or like the hermeneutics of discipleship that he gives, showing up at Advent, to me is one of sitting there and rediscovering the otherness of yourself. Because what our technological world would like to give us is the self that has now been known to be monetized and its intention held.
Mm-hmm.
And it wants to give us that version of ourselves back and back. And when you do that, data has colonized your subjectivity, that inner room that Christ tells his disciples to cultivate. Not a literal space, but it's the otherness of one's own subjectivity. Treasure that and sit in it. And in that space, encounter Christ in that otherness. And then, right, when you own and embrace your own God belovedness, that the most true thing about you is what God has said about you. A God who's chosen to be with us, even though when God showed up, we didn't know who the hell that was. In fact, we crucified him, right? If you can get in that space, then that reorients a way to think about our relationships in our lived material experience, but it also says something about the others who are simulated in their otherness for either our own sameness or our own revulsion and contentment. And if that's not good news, obviously it was good news then because people thought, but it's even more good news now because we've had our own inner room hijacked by algorithms and told us that this is who we are. Now we're going to sell to you. This is who we are. Now we're going to show you what can piss you off and work you up into a frenzy. This is who you are. And there's this bit of, no. That gap of genuine otherness is the space where you can come to trust the divine belovedness of who you are. And come on, that's what I'm talking about. That shit.
Well,
now I'm a little worked
because I also want to say too, and Paul, I'll let you jump in too, but I
Okay.
just want to say what I love about this too is Bonhoeffer also reads this into Luther's Two Kingdoms theology and really pushes back. And I want to say, in light of what you're saying, it's a hermeneutic for the individual disciple and group of disciples, but it's also a hermeneutic for how the disciples see the very cosmos, right? And one of the lies that were often sold by people who have got into bed with principalities and powers is that the cosmos has been hijacked and that they're in control of it. But the good news of Advent and this Christ reality is that for the disciples standing on the ground and sometimes feeling like the cosmos has been hijacked, right, by the power brokers of Silicon Valley and those in, the offices, with the arsenals and all the power, is that despite all appearances, it hasn't been. That the Lord of the cosmos, the one who created them, holds them together and is renewing all of them, has control. And we are invited into that control. And so even when it seems like the kingdom of man or the city of man has overrun, right, the kingdom of God or the city of God, nevertheless, like Advent is proof that God is still overthrowing all of those and it's never been hijacked. And it's okay, right? And God is making good on the promise that it's okay. As out of control it seems, he's still in control. And faith is hope in things unseen, right? Maybe we can't always see it, but nevertheless, our hope is that it's true, that as much as it seems like the kingdom of man has taken control, it hasn't. It's only a matter of time. And whether it's the Herods back then or the Herods and Caesars back then, today, it's just illusion. It's only a matter of time.
If I could, I want to jump in a little bit, Tripp, of what you were saying, and just simply, one, throw on a big amen to both of you, but also just add that otherness in yourself. If you're not open to it in yourself, you're going to attempt to destroy it outside of you. And it's going to be that which you're most disgusted by, that which you are most reviled by, because disgust is actually a threat to is this like emotion we feel when there's a threat to the self, to the psyche, to the sense of who we are, both physically, bodily, but also to that like ego, that sense of who I am. And so just to put in there, what it's going to feel like is disgust. The first time you do that, you will feel revulsion. You will be revolted. You'll feel revulsion at that sense, that part of you. And that's where I think like the scandal of the Christian narrative is that, no, it's while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Actually, that's the you. And so you don't have to pretend that you're a good person. You don't have to pretend that you're that image of who you are. You can actually experience that disgust. And here, just to kind of tie us back to where we were before, what changes disgust is intimacy. What changes disgust, the only way to change your own disgust reaction that we found is actually through mindful engagement and relationship. You have to actually get to know somebody. You have to actually spend time with it. The very same thing that is absolutely disgusting. I often when I teach on this, I like, hey, imagine drinking your own spit out of a cup. That's gross. Imagine drinking somebody else's spit. That's even grosser. Imagine making out with your partner. Oh, that's actually kind of cool. What's the difference there? And the difference is intimacy. And so because love itself, because of this disturbance we've been talking about, it actually requires an engagement with our disgust. And intimacy allows the other to be a part of you in a way that's actually beautiful and creative, as opposed to violating and horrific, which is when intimacy and when love and when trust isn't there. So I would just add that like qualitatively, that's not going to feel good the first time you do it. I think that's one of the places we get tripped up on is we get this idea that, oh, if I'm doing the right thing, I'm going to have this mystical, powerful, like angel singing moment of, yes, I've got it. When I can say, I'll just put as anecdotally as a therapist, when my patients have their big aha moments, I'm usually like, oh, dang it. Because their aha moments are going to end with, oh, it was my mom's fault. Oh, that's it. You're right. And it's like in that big moment, like they've just bought their own bull. They've just shifted to make themselves more comfortable. When it actually requires, and this again goes back to Advent, sitting in the darkness. Come, Lord Jesus, come. Waiting, not like refusing all of the lures to make yourself more comfortable, all of the lures to saddle the energy to make yourself calm, sitting in that. And this like foolish hope that God's going to break into the world. Anyway, I'll just.
Oh, no, that's what I'm talking about. Come on, Paul. That's what you're trying to benedict us.
We're all like out benedicting each other here.
Well,
we're like old game on the baseball bat.
Well, this is fun. This is very fun. I'd love to do this again.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. This is great.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, Michael, it was your idea.
It was a collection of ideas.
Yeah.
I mean,
I just sent you my Post-it notes.
yeah. And Paul introduced himself and sent me cool articles. So here we are.
Yeah.
Here we go.
But okay, y'all both need to definitely come to camp this year. I would say that's one of the other ways you can mess with the online world is you can come hang out with a whole bunch of people and listen to the same podcast and nerd out with theologians. And then you can judge them for their pop culture sensitivities. You know, they can be like, oh, you might be able to say prolepsis and prehension with a straight face, but your take on Star Trek is ridiculous. That can happen.
Often does.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, I have some of the camp people that are like hardcore into Star Trek are like, no, Tripp, you really didn't like it. And I'm kind of like a Star Wars fundamentalist, you know? And so next year, a couple of them they're like making me a list of Star Trek episodes to watch. And we're going to talk. This is Tripp's embrace of otherness.
Here we go.
Essential reading is, I'll send it because I can't remember the name of the chapter offhand, but David Graeber writes a piece on Star Trek and says that, and he says one of the things that Star Trek has to reckon with is it's a utopia, but is it also kind of like the political system is fascist because it's like one centralized intergalactic political party that goes around like solving everybody's problems.
That is Prime Directive.
Yeah. And it's like
Prime Directive is a lot better than our late stage capitalist Prime Directive. You
can have a hierarchy of Prime Directives.
Some are better and worse than others. We don't have to identify them with the kingdom of God, but nonetheless, when I think of Prime Directives that suck, I'm going to go with ours. Well, it had good showing.
In the Star Wars universe, it's like they're trying to work it out, like a proper republic, and the Empire is like trying to just pull it all together.
Yeah,
and that's not the way.
And look, if I can reference David Graeber while being a Star Wars supremacist for anti-supremacist reasons, this seems like a great thing for you to send me.
Oh yeah, it'll be your kill shot. I mean, or the ace in your sleeve.
Yeah, we don't want to kill anybody.
We don't want to kill anybody. I'm a nonviolent. I'm a nonviolent guy.
Metaphor.
Just their hopes and dreams.
Just their hopes and dreams. And then when those hopes and dreams have died, you too can watch A New Hope on New Year's Eve and time it so that the Death Star blows up at midnight. If y'all haven't done that, you haven't been being a dad correctly. It's a game changer. You got it like right at the right age where the kids they're loving their Clone Wars cartoons and they're like, wow, this is so good. And I'm like, are you ready for Star Wars? I want to. You got to wait till New Year's Eve. I'll let you stay up till midnight. Oh, really?
Boom. My parenting win was when my son looked at me and went, Daddy, Darth Vader told us he was Luke's father. And I was like, yeah, no little punk at the playground told you that. You had to experience that for yourself.
Yeah.
And his little mind was blown. I was like, I've now succeeded as a parent. That's all I needed to do. That was that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm personally impressed. I managed not to have a 20-minute excursus on Lord of the Rings. And we were talking about technology. So as a coda, I would just like Peter Thiel to know he gets it completely wrong, but he has appropriately named Palantir because it is the invitation to know things you should not know if the genuine flourishing of others' relations are your goal.
Or even and yourself and your own flourishing.
Yeah. Yeah. But Gandalf the White would come back and kick Peter Thiel in the nuts. That's our Advent truth.
Amen.
And, go and do likewise.
Or this is like fan fiction alternative
Oh.
endings. What if the hobbits befriend Peter Thiel? And in the end,
Oh, God.
what Peter Thiel needed was just a meal with the hobbits and some friendship, some
I feel
real
like
friendship.
he's
I
more
think-
like a worm tongue.
Mm.
I'm just gonna be a scourging of the Shire instead.
Yeah, does scourge that junk. I mean, Frodo doesn't get his hands dirty in the last edit, but in the early version, he did. He did. Sometimes I'm like, come on, JR. You get
Well, now
it
that I'm
okay?
thinking about it, there's that deleted scene of the mouth of Sauron. You
Are you
remember
talking
that
about
one?
the movie or
The
in
movie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's that deleted scene, and he he gets Frodo's vest
Yeah.
and throws it and has everybody convinced that Frodo's dead. What's wild about that scene is everybody in that scene except Aragorn looks rattled. Even Gandalf is rattled in that scene. And Aragorn is the only one who's just nope, and he cuts off his head. That's the king material right there. He
Yeah.
doesn't rattle.
If you're going to have a king, make sure it's a descendant of Numenor who
Absolutely.
preserved the white tree and then finds another one, in the postlude. But, and also if you're going to marry an elf that forsakes their serial longevity, it should be Liv Tyler.
Yeah.
I can't say it's true for everyone, but batting average wise, we're talking about Hall of Fame batting average right there. True story. All right. Good night.
Good night.
Nice.